The crystal walls of the briefing room showed images that made everyone's blood run cold. Thousands of dark ships moved through space like angry insects, leaving dead worlds behind them. The Vorthan fleet had been destroying everything in its path for weeks now, and no one could stop them. Commander Jake Morrison sat at the far end of the long table, his hands folded in front of him. Around him, representatives from 12 different alien species talked over each other in panic. Their voices filled the room with fear and desperation, but Morrison said nothing. He just watched the enemy ships on the screens. Captain Lisa Hayes stood behind her commander, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She had served with Morrison for 3 years, and she had never seen him this quiet during a crisis. His blue eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display, but something in his face made her stomach tighten. She knew that look, even if she could not name it. Ambassador Kethvar slammed 4 arms on the table, his purple skin darker with anger. The Zentari delegate had been one of the first to face the Vorthans, and half his people were already dead or missing. Their weapons cut through our quantum shields like they are made of paper, he said, his voice shaking. Nothing we have can hurt them. They adapt to our technology in hours. The insect-like hive speaker clicked and buzzed, its mechanical translator, turning the sounds into words. Evacuation protocols must begin immediately. The outer rim colonies cannot be saved. We must focus on protecting the core worlds. High Marshal Vexthul stood up, his reptilian form towering over the table. The Valdorian was the military leader of the Galactic Defense Council, and even he looked defeated. The Vorthan advance cannot be stopped, he said, his deep voice echoing in the chamber. Their biotechnology learns from every battle. They have consumed 17 star systems in 6 weeks. We must consider strategic withdrawal to the inner sectors. The crystalline Etherians made soft musical sounds that meant despair in their language. 3 of their colony worlds had been the first to fall, their populations of billions simply gone without a trace. The Vorthans did not take prisoners or leave survivors. They consumed everything and moved on. Morrison continued to stare at the enemy formation on the display. His right hand opened and closed slowly, the only sign that he was even listening to the chaos around him. Hayes noticed the gesture and felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen that hand movement before, right before Morrison made decisions that other people did not expect. The bioships regenerate damage faster than we can cause it, said the Aquari representative, water dripping from her gills as she spoke. Their hive mind coordinates attacks that no single commander could plan. We are fighting an enemy that thinks with thousands of brains at once. Ambassador Kethvar turned to Morrison with desperate hope in his large black eyes. Commander, your species has been resourceful in past conflicts. The humans always find solutions that others miss. What tactical options does Earth recommend? The room fell silent. 12 different species waited for the human to speak. Morrison finally looked up from the displays, his weathered face calm in a way that seemed wrong for the situation. How long until they reached the Centauri Gate? He asked. The Centauri Gate was the massive portal that connected this sector to the core worlds where trillions of civilians lived. If the Vorthans reached it, the war would be over. 14 rotations at their current speed, High Marshal Vexthul answered. But Commander, surely you understand that normal warfare has proven useless. The Vorthan bioships heal themselves. Their hive mind plans better than our best generals. What could your species possibly do that we have not tried? Morrison stood up slowly. His human form looked small next to the towering aliens around him, but something in the way he moved made the room feel different. 14 days, he said, converting the alien time measurement. Captain Hayes, send authorization code Omega-7 to Fleet Command. Tell them we need the Nebraska, the Montana, and the Wyoming. Full deployment. Hayes felt her heart skip a beat. She had never heard those ship names in all her years of service, but something in Morrison's voice stopped her from asking questions. Yes, sir, she said, activating her communication unit. The alien delegates looked at each other with confusion. Vexthul's translator struggled with the unfamiliar names. Commander Morrison, our databases show no record of these human vessels. Are they new ships? Some experimental technology your people have been developing? Morrison's expression did not change. Old technology, actually. Captain Hayes, also send a message to Earth Defense Command. Tell them the gloves are coming off. Hayes typed the message with shaking fingers. She did not understand what her commander meant, but the coldness in his voice made her afraid to ask. Morrison paused and looked at each alien representative in turn. His eyes held something that made them all lean back in their seats. And inform all civilian populations in the threatened sectors that they have exactly 13 days to reach minimum safe distance. The hive speaker's mechanical voice rose in pitch. Minimum safe distance from what? Commander, you speak in riddles while worlds burn. What can 3 unknown ships do against thousands of Vorthan biovessels? For the first time during the entire briefing, Morrison smiled. It was not a happy smile or a confident smile. It was the kind of smile that made Hayes want to step away from him. Several of the aliens actually moved their chairs back from the table. From what humans do when we stop playing by the rules, Morrison said quietly. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The tactical displays continued to show the Vorthan fleet moving closer to populated systems, but somehow the enemy ships no longer seemed like the most dangerous thing in the room. Ambassador Kethvar cleared his throat. Commander, the Galactic Warfare Accords clearly state that certain weapons and tactics are forbidden. Surely Earth Command would not violate treaties that keep us all civilized. Morrison turned back to the tactical display. The enemy fleet moved like a dark cloud across the star map, leaving empty systems behind. The Accords were written by people who never had to choose between civilization and survival, he said. You want to know what happens next? In 3 days you will understand why humans are so polite in these meetings. He walked toward the door, Captain Hayes following behind him. At the entrance, Morrison stopped and looked back at the room full of worried aliens. The reason we stay quiet in briefings like this is not because we do not know what to do, he said. It is because once we start talking about solutions, the conversation becomes very different, and no one in this room is ready for that conversation yet. The door closed behind them, leaving 12 alien species alone with their fear and a growing understanding that they might have been asking the wrong questions all along. Captain Lisa Hayes followed Commander Morrison down the long corridor from the briefing room. The metal walls of Nexus Prime hummed with energy, but the sound felt different now. Everything felt different after what had just happened in that room. Sir? Hayes said, trying to keep her voice steady. Those ship names you mentioned, the Nebraska, Montana, Wyoming, I have never seen them in any fleet registry. Are they classified vessels? Morrison kept walking, his boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. They are not classified, Captain. They are quarantined. Hayes felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. In 3 years of service, she had learned that Morrison never used words carelessly. Quarantined from what? From people who might use them. They reached Morrison's quarters, and he gestured for her to enter. The room was simple and clean, with a small desk, a bed, and a viewing port that showed the stars. On the wall hung a single photograph of Earth, blue and peaceful in the darkness of space. Morrison sat down at his desk and activated a secure communication terminal. Hayes had never seen this particular device before. It looked older than standard fleet equipment with physical switches instead of touch controls. Computer. Authorization Morrison Alpha 779. Connect me to Earth Defense Command Priority Black. The screen flickered and Hayes expected to see Admiral Peterson or one of the other fleet commanders she knew. Instead, an elderly woman appeared, her white hair pulled back severely and her eyes sharp with intelligence. She wore no uniform, just a simple gray suit. Jake, the woman said without any greeting. I was wondering when you would call. Director Walsh, Morrison replied. The situation has escalated beyond normal parameters. I need the old tools. Director Walsh leaned back in her chair. Behind her, Hayes could see what looked like a government office, but the walls were covered with star charts and technical diagrams she did not recognize. How escalated? Walsh asked. Total species extinction if we follow standard protocols. The enemy has consumed 17 systems. Conventional weapons are useless. The aliens are talking about retreat to the core worlds. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Jake, you know what those ships represent. We sealed them away for good reasons, the Mars Rebellion, the corporate wars. We promised ourselves we would never walk that path again. Hayes listened to the conversation with growing confusion. She had studied military history, but she had never heard of ships being sealed away or quarantined. What could be so dangerous that Earth would hide it from its own fleet? I know, Morrison said quietly. But if we do not act, there will be no one left to keep our promises to. Director Walsh looked directly at Hayes through the screen. Captain, what is your security clearance? Level 7, Director, Hayes answered, standing straighter. Not high enough. Walsh's eyes moved back to Morrison. Jake, are you certain about this? Once we open that door, we cannot close it again. The other species will know what we are capable of. The galaxy will change. Morrison stood up and walked to the viewing port. Outside, Hayes could see the lights of alien ships moving through space, all of them running from an enemy they could not defeat. The galaxy is already changing, Morrison said. The question is whether anyone will be alive to see what it becomes. Walsh sighed. Very well. I will authorize release of the Nebraska-class vessels. They will reach your position in 72 hours. Jake, I hope you know what you are doing. I know exactly what I am doing. That is what terrifies me. The connection ended, and Morrison turned back to Hayes. She had never seen her commander look so tired. Sir, what are these ships? Why are they quarantined? And who was that woman? Morrison sat down heavily in his chair. Director Walsh runs a department that officially does not exist. She oversees weapons and technologies that we decided were too dangerous to use. But we are using them now. Yes. Hayes waited for more explanation, but Morrison seemed lost in thought. Finally, she asked the question that scared her most. Sir, what did we do during the Mars Rebellion? Morrison looked at her for a long time before answering. We won, Captain. We won in a way that made sure no one would ever rebel against Earth again. Mars had 2 billion people before the rebellion. After we finished, it had none. Hayes felt the blood drain from her face. We killed 2 billion people? No, Morrison said quietly. We made it so they never existed in the first place. Before Hayes could ask what that meant, Morrison's communication terminal chimed. A message appeared on the screen from the Galactic Defense Council. The Vorthan fleet had accelerated. They would reach the Centauri Gate in 11 days instead of 14. Morrison read the message and then typed a response. Hayes watched him send new orders to Earth Defense Command, requesting additional resources she had never heard of. Omega Protocols, Silence Authorization, Final Solution Clearance. Captain, Morrison said without looking up from his terminal, I need you to send a message to all civilian populations in the threatened sectors. Tell them they have 10 days to evacuate to minimum safe distance. How far is minimum safe distance, sir? 100 light years. Hayes stared at him. Sir, that is impossible. There are trillions of people in those sectors. The evacuation ships cannot move everyone that far in 10 days. Morrison finally looked at her, and his eyes held a sadness that made her want to cry. Then we will save who we can, Captain. And we will make sure this never happens again. Over. The next 2 days, Hayes watched her commander work with quiet efficiency. He sent coded messages to Earth, authorized the movement of resources she could not track, and coordinated with departments that did not appear in any official directory. The alien representatives tried to contact him several times, asking for updates on the mysterious human ships. Morrison ignored their calls. On the 3rd day, Hayes stood in the observation deck of Nexus Prime, looking out at the stars. The evacuation had begun, but it was chaos. Millions of ships filled space, carrying families and belongings away from worlds they would never see again. Morrison joined her at the viewing port. Together they watched the desperate exodus of an entire sector of the galaxy. Captain, Morrison said, in 6 hours, 3 ships will arrive that carry the power to end this war in minutes. When that happens, 12 alien species will learn something about humanity that we have spent 50 years trying to hide. What is that, sir? Morrison placed his hand on the viewing port. watching a transport ship full of refugees disappear into hyperspace. That when humans go to war, we do not fight to win battles. We fight to make sure the war never happens again. Captain Lisa Hayes pressed her face against the cold viewing port of Nexus Prime. 3 objects had just appeared at the edge of the star system, emerging from hyperspace like dark nightmares. They were not like any human ships she had ever seen. Keo vessels were huge, easily twice the size of the largest Galactic Defense Council warships. Their hulls were black metal, covered in sharp angles and strange patterns that hurt to look at for too long. No lights showed on their surfaces, and they moved through space with a silence that felt wrong. Commander Morrison stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. He watched his ships with the expression of a man looking at old graves. "They look angry," Hayes said without thinking. "They should," Morrison replied. "They were built by angry people for an angry purpose." Behind them, the observation lounge filled with alien representatives. Ambassador Kethvar pressed his 4 arms against the viewing port, his purple skin pale with shock. High Marshal Vexthul brought his staff officers, all of them carrying data tablets that beeped and flashed with sensor readings. "Commander Morrison," Vexthul said, his reptilian voice tight with worry, "our scans show energy signatures we have never seen before. These vessels emit power readings that exceed anything in our databases. What classification of warship are these?" Morrison continued watching his ships move into formation. They arranged themselves in a perfect triangle, each one pointing toward the approaching Vorthan fleet. "They are not warships, Marshal. They are solutions." The hive speaker arrived with a group of insect-like technicians, all of them clicking and buzzing with excitement and fear. "The weapon systems on these vessels violate 17 different interstellar treaties," the mechanical translator announced. "The energy output suggests destructive capability far beyond galactic safety standards." Morrison turned to face the growing crowd of aliens. The treaties were written by species that never faced total extinction. Ambassador Kethvar stepped forward, his large black eyes wide with disbelief. "Commander, surely Earth Command understands that the Galactic Warfare Accords exist to prevent the use of planet-killing weapons. These ships appear to carry armaments that could destroy entire star systems." "Not destroy," Morrison said quietly. "Erase." The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Hayes felt her skin crawl at the way Morrison said it, so calm and certain. The Etherian delegates made soft musical sounds that their translators turned into worried questions. "What does erase mean in this context? Our language databases show no military definition for this term when applied to stellar warfare." Morrison walked to the central display screen that showed both fleets. The 3 human ships sat motionless in space while the Vorthan armada continued its advance. 2,000 bioships moved like a dark cloud, their organic hulls pulsing with adaptive armor that had proven immune to every weapon the galaxy could field. "Captain Hayes," Morrison said, "open a channel to all vessels and stations in the system." Hayes activated the communication array with trembling fingers. Every ship, station, and monitoring post within 50 light-years would hear what came next. Morrison's voice echoed through space, reaching thousands of alien ears. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Force. All non-human vessels and installations are ordered to maintain minimum safe distance of 1 astronomical unit from the current engagement zone. This is not a request." High Marshal Vexthul grabbed Morrison's arm with a clawed hand. "Commander, 1 astronomical unit is the distance from a star to its primary planet. Why would ships need to retreat so far from a simple battle?" Morrison gently removed the alien's grip. "Because what we are about to do is not a simple battle." The Vorthan fleet began spreading into attack formation. Their bioships moved with the coordination of a hive mind, each vessel perfectly positioned to support the others. Dark energy crackled along their living hulls as they prepared weapons that had consumed 17 star systems. Hayes watched the tactical display with growing horror. "Sir, there are over 2,000 enemy ships. Our 3 vessels are completely outnumbered." "Numbers do not matter when you change the rules of mathematics," Morrison replied. The first human ship, the Nebraska, began powering its weapons. Energy readings on the display climbed higher and higher, reaching levels that made the monitoring equipment struggle to keep up. The alien technicians stared at their instruments in disbelief. "Impossible," whispered the Aquari representative, water dripping from her gills. "No single vessel can generate that much power. The energy requirements would require the output of an entire star." Morrison watched the Nebraska's weapon systems reach full charge. "We learned how to harvest star energy after the corporate wars. It took us 30 years to build ships that could contain it safely." The second ship, the Montana, began its power-up sequence. The space around it shimmered with barely contained energy that made the stars behind it look twisted and wrong. Ambassador Kethvar backed away from the viewing port. "Commander, what kind of weapons are these? Our best scientists have never theorized technology that could generate such power." "Signatures. They are not weapons in the way you understand weapons," Morrison said. "They do not fire projectiles or energy beams. They convince reality to change its mind about whether certain things exist." The third ship, the Wyoming, completed its charging cycle. All three human vessels now hummed with power that made the fabric of space-time bend around them. Several alien delegates fell to their knees, overwhelmed by energies their senses were never designed to process. Hayes gripped the railing of the observation deck. "Sir, I do not understand. How can you convince reality to change?" Morrison's expression carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "The same way we convinced reality that 2 billion rebels on Mars never existed. We found out how to edit the universe, Captain. We learned how to delete mistakes." The Vorthan fleet reached attack range and began firing. Thousands of bioweapons discharged at once, dark energy that had proven unstoppable against every defense the galaxy possessed. Morrison raised his hand to signal the Nebraska. 12 species are about to learn why humans are so careful about following rules," he said. "It is not because we respect them. It is because when we break rules, we break them permanently." High Marshal Vexthul's data tablet showed the Vorthon attack reaching the human ships. The dark energy struck the Nebraska's shields and simply stopped, held back by barriers that should not have been able to exist. "Fire," Morrison said quietly. The Nebraska's weapon discharged with a flash of white light that lasted exactly 3 seconds. When the light faded, 600 Vorthan ships were gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, not disabled. Simply gone, as if they had never existed in the first place. The observation lounge fell into absolute silence. 12 alien species stared at empty space where an entire fleet had been moments before. The silence in the observation lounge stretched on for what felt like hours. 12 alien species stared at the tactical display, their minds struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. Where 600 Vorthan bioships had been, attacking moments before, there was now only empty space. Ambassador Kethvar was the first to find his voice. "Where did they go?" he whispered, his forearms shaking as he pointed at the display. "The ships. They were there and now." "Now they were never there," Commander Morrison said calmly. "The universe has been corrected." Captain Lisa Hayes gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. She had served in the human fleet for years, had fought pirates and raiders, had seen battles where good people died, but she had never seen anything like this. "Sir, how is that possible?" Morrison watched the remaining Vorthan ships on the display. The enemy fleet had stopped its attack, the bioships floating motionless in space as their hive mind tried to process what had happened. "When humans first developed quantum technology, we discovered something interesting about reality. It turns out the universe is very bad at remembering things that do not make sense." High Marshal Vexthul stepped forward, his reptilian features twisted with shock. "Commander, you are saying that your weapon somehow convinced the universe to forget that those ships existed?" "More than that," Morrison replied. "It convinced the universe that they never existed in the first place. No wreckage, no energy signature, no disturbance in space-time. As far as reality is concerned, those 600 ships were never built, never launched, never came to this system. The hive speaker's mechanical translator crackled with static as it tried to process the insect-like delegate's distressed clicking. This violates every law of physics we understand. Matter and energy cannot simply cease to exist. Morrison turned to look at the alien. You are correct. They cannot cease to exist. But they can be convinced that they never existed in the first place. The difference is important. On the tactical display, the remaining Vorthon ships began to move again, but instead of continuing their attack, they started to retreat. The hive mind that controlled them had apparently decided that facing an enemy who could erase reality was not worth the risk. They are running, observed the Aquari representative, water streaming from her gills in what Hayes recognized as extreme stress. The Vorthons have never retreated from any battle in their 10,000-year history. They understand what we understand, Morrison said. Some enemies cannot be defeated, they can only be removed. The second human ship, the Montana, adjusted its position to block the Vorthon retreat route. Its weapon systems began to charge with the same terrible energy that had powered the first attack. Ambassador Kethvar grabbed Morrison's arm. Commander, they are retreating. The battle is over. There is no need for further violence. Morrison gently removed the alien's grip. This was never about winning a battle, Ambassador. This was about ending a war. The Montana fired its reality-erasing weapon. Another flash of white light, another 3 seconds of impossible brightness. When it faded, 600 more Vorthon ships had joined their companions in non-existence. The remaining bioships tried to scatter, but their organic technology was no match for human engineering. The third vessel, the Wyoming, moved to intercept them with predatory grace. Please, High Marshal Vexthul said, his voice breaking. Commander, they understand now. They will surrender. There is no need to. There is every need. Morrison interrupted. His voice carried the weight of terrible certainty. A species that has conquered for 10,000 years does not surrender. They retreat, regroup, and return stronger. The only way to stop a conquest species is to make sure they cannot conquer anyone ever again. The Wyoming charged its weapon systems. The remaining Vorthon ships sent desperate communication signals in every direction, broadcasting surrender offers in dozens of languages. But the human ship did not respond to their pleas. Sir, Hayes said quietly, they are trying to surrender. Morrison watched the tactical display without expression. Captain, how many billions of people did the Vorthons kill before they decided to surrender? How many worlds did they consume? How many species did they erase from existence? Hayes had no answer. The Vorthons had been destroying civilizations for millennia, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. But watching them face the same fate felt wrong somehow. The Wyoming fired. The last of the great Vorthon armada ceased to exist. Morrison activated the communication system. This is Commander Morrison to all monitoring stations. The Vorthon threat has been neutralized. Begin broadcast of surrender terms to all remaining Vorthon territories. Within minutes, responses flooded in from across the galaxy. Vorthon colonies that had never known defeat were offering unconditional surrender. Military fleets that had conquered star systems were laying down their weapons. An empire that had ruled for 10,000 years was begging for mercy from a species they had never heard of. How? Ambassador Kethvar asked, his voice hollow with shock. How did they surrender so quickly? Because news travels fast in a hive mind, Morrison explained. Every Vorthon in the galaxy just watched their most powerful fleet get erased from reality. They understand that humans do not fight wars, we solve problems. High Marshal Vexthul collapsed into a chair, his data tablet falling from nerveless claws. Commander, what have you done? The balance of power in the galaxy has just shifted completely. Every species will now fear humanity above all others. Morrison walked to the viewing port and looked out at the empty space where 2 fleets had been fighting moments before. Fear is better than extinction, Marshal, and understanding is better than ignorance. The 3 human ships began powering down their reality-erasing weapons. The space around them stopped bending and twisting as the impossible energies were contained once again. Captain Hayes, Morrison said. Send a message to Director Walsh. Tell her the demonstration is complete, and we are returning the ships to quarantine status. Hayes typed the message with shaking hands. Sir, what happens now? The aliens know what we can do. They know we have been hiding this power for decades. Morrison continued staring out at the stars. Now they understand why. Human diplomats are so polite, Captain. Why we follow their treaties and respect their customs and ask permission before we act. Because we do not want to use these weapons? Because when you have the power to edit reality itself, courtesy becomes a survival necessity. Morrison turned to face the room full of shocked aliens. For everyone else, the 3 human ships disappeared into hyperspace as silently as they had arrived. Behind them, they left a sector finally at peace, and 12 alien species with a new understanding of the quiet humans who had been sitting at their council tables for 50 years. Ambassador Kethvar looked at Morrison with new eyes. Your silence at the briefing. You already knew what you were going to do. Morrison nodded. When humans stop talking in meetings, it is not because we do not know what to do. It is because we have already decided what needs to be done, and the conversation becomes very different after that. The commander walked toward the exit. Captain. Hayes following behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back at the alien delegates one last time. The Galactic Defense Council wanted to know why Earth is so committed to peaceful solutions, he said. Now you know. When the alternative is erasing civilizations from existence itself, diplomacy stops being a choice and becomes a moral imperative. The door closed behind them, leaving 12 species alone with the knowledge that their quiet, polite human allies had been protecting them all along, not from external threats, but from humanity itself.